Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's Thursday morning, so hopefully everybody had enough time to get their questions in. So let's jump in and see what we got. First up, DW623 is going to New York City for the first time in a few months and just wanted to see if I had any recommendations for fun video game or nerdy locations to visit and any good local comfort food or other restaurants. An In-N-Out burger of the East Coast or pizza place maybe. So from the video game side of things, I haven't lived there in years now, but I think a good way to kind of just absorb what it's like to be there and see some of the cool stuff would be to start out in Rockefeller Center and go to the Nintendo store and of course, see the center and all that cool stuff. And then walk to J&L, which is partially a really cool import store and also partially a little expensive for tourists. So you'll see certain things there that are great deals and other things where you're like, okay, I'll get it somewhere else, which is totally fine. And if you want to do some more wandering, I would also check out Video Games New York, which is a subway ride away. J&L should be a decent walk from Rockefeller Center. You certainly don't need to hop on the subway, but you would for Video Games New York, unless you like really long walks, and by all means, go for it. But and then obviously, if you wanted to see a place that's just top tier arcade, I would head over to Brooklyn Games and Arcade, and that would also be a subway ride. So these things aren't hard to get to, but if you've never been to New York, it's something you just want to research a little bit first. Uptown versus downtown is exactly what you would expect. Look at the map of Manhattan. Up is up, down is down. It's weird to say that because it seems obvious, but it's also, if you're just staring at that subway map, you have no idea which way is which. It's a giant pain. But yeah, those are the spots, especially Brooklyn Arcade. Was my home away from home when I was there in the city. I was there all the time and I still love that place. I don't have the time to get down there as much as I would like to. As far as food, in the outskirts of the touristy section, so not in Times Square or Rockefeller Center, but just outside, check out the food carts. The halal carts there are often amazing. And the best one that I'd been to was actually kind of closer to where I used to live, farther away from all that. But once again, it's been years, so I'm not going to tell you to go over that way. But yeah, I would definitely try that because it's an experience you can't quite get anywhere else. And you could also look up things like Ray's Pizza, which I believe is right by Video Games New York as well. But honestly, anything other than the $1 slices of pizza are probably going to be better than most other places. So I would, most other places around the country, I guess. So yeah, that's really it for me. For living in the city, it was amazing. I wish I could still live there, but it was just being able to experience all of that with a quick walk or a hop on the subway. That was the special part for me because it was really cool to live right in the middle of it. But there's just so much good food and so much cool stuff to see. I would kind of just hit up those spots though, a decent halal cart, especially if you like that kind of food. And now I'm getting hungry talking about it. Thanks, DW. But yeah, Video Games New York, Brooklyn Arcade, J&L, and of course the Nintendo store are all great spots to hit up just to kind of see and just get a sense of the scene here. Dustin Madison has an interesting question for people gaming on flat panel TVs that want to upgrade their retro gaming setup. So let's say that you've decided you don't want to use CRTs, you've already bought some amazing OLED TV and a RetroTink 4K Pro, and you have consoles that require a mod to get the best video quality out of it. What would I go for if the console has both an HDMI or an RGB mod? Would I do an RGB mod and a good analog cable into the RetroTink 4K, or would I just go HDMI? And in that scenario, I would go HDMI as long as a few things can be double checked here. But I just want to be clear, it's a great question, but Dustin is not saying, how do I do this on a budget? How do I get started? Does it matter? Dustin's saying, I've already decided I want to mod the consoles for the best quality. Which one would you go? And for the N64, I would do one of the HDMI mods that gets direct video out. So 480i is still 480i, 240p is still 240p, and have that sent directly to the RetroTink 4K because you get a clean digital to digital signal. You could let the Tink do all the processing, deinterlacing, all of that, and you're basically just getting the raw signal from the N64 and doing it that way. Now, going to RGB would only make sense if the console didn't have an HDMI mod available, or if the HDMI mod didn't support direct video output. And in the case of something like the Megaswitch HD for the Genesis, Now it's kind of up in the air as which one you would want to pick, because the Megaswitch HD, at least at the time of recording this, doesn't support direct 240p output. However, it does have that really cool dithering option in there. So you could decide that you want to do something like use the RetroTink 4K to do the decimation to drop it back to 240p and then rescale it. You could try to add scan lines in a different way. So that's when things get complicated. In the case of something like the N64, sure, go HDMI, because you need a mod to get RGB anyway. Everything's going to be exactly as you want. But in the case of mods that are gray area, it doesn't do 240p, but it offers something that has to be done on the console end only. It can't be done on any external scaler at all. That's where you really got to just kind of step back and decide for yourself which one you want. And in the case of the Megaswitch HD, if you don't like CRT emulation, you just want to put it square pixels or sharp pixels on your flat panel, yeah, I actually would go with the HDMI mod. I think that's pretty cool, and you could gain things like SG-1000 support and all the stuff I talked about in this week's roundup. But that's where you kind of have to step back and take a look at the whole picture. So, good question. Hopefully I was able to point you in the right direction, but none of this stuff's easy. One more from Dustin. They have a question that could determine if I'm a legit human being that we as a collective of retro enthusiasts and nerds can trust wholeheartedly, or if I'm just an evil reptilian extraterrestrial invader trying to prepare the planet's ignorant population for immediate eradication without resistance so your kind can take over smoothly. When eating buffalo wings, which is the only true option to dip them in, ranch or blue cheese? Choose wisely if you value truth, justice, and the American way. Blue cheese. But I don't look down upon ranch. I like it, but if I had to choose one, I would pick it. I think it's more of a sharp bite, good contrast to the spiciness, and I like it. But as my fellow lizard people would like to chime in on this, go right ahead, my fellow aliens. But yeah, I don't know. Funny question, but blue cheese for me. But if whenever I've been at a restaurant and my friends have ordered ranch and I accidentally dip into the ranch by accident, I'm never mad. I just prefer blue cheese, especially if you get one of the spicy ones that actually tastes good, because that's a big thing with me. You drop spice on anything and it's just burn, it's useless and it's not fun, and I get annoyed. However, very, very often, if you have the right combination of spices, it actually lights up the taste buds so that whatever you're eating actually tastes better, just spicy too. And in that case, having it get hit with like a sharp bite of like a chunk of blue cheese, all that is awesome. I do love wings. I haven't had them in a long time. I don't know why, but now I want wings. Between you and DW, I'm hungry. Damn it! SL72 wants to know if the output from the OSSC Pro's Extra AV out could go directly into a Sony BVM D24. They've converted all their consoles to HDMI except the 3DO, as they haven't managed to get a retro gem for it yet, or replace them with a mister for their day-to-day use. They go via an HDMI matrix to a TINC 4K for display on the OLED, and to the D24 via OSSC Pro as part of the DAC downscaler. Currently, that goes via an Extron RGB 203, outputting RGBS into the D24. That works fine, but they were wondering if the RGB 203 is now redundant. Would they break anything by directly connecting the OSSC Pro AV out to the D24? The OSSC Pro Wiki states that the RGBS output is RGB CS TTLC sync, and the sync input specification of the D24 is 0.3 to 8 volts peak to peak. Do I think it is likely to work? They remember their Sega Saturn didn't display correctly when they were directly connected to the D24 before they had it. So, great question. First and foremost, do you use the Extron RGB 203 for image centering at all? And do you also occasionally use the extra inputs from it, or are you only using it to convert the signal to be a little bit more compatible with the D24? If the answer is yes for the first part, you might as well just keep it. You already own it. Why not? Now, I would never tell anybody go buy one for this scenario, but it's already wired in. You already got it. Why not? However, if you remove it, it should work absolutely perfectly. There should not be any problems. And if there are, it would only be a result of some kind of signal conversion. So I'm just going to throw one out here. I've never tested this, by the way, but maybe direct video out via HDMI and the Saturn core might send some kind of signal that's weird when you run it through the OSSC Pro and downscale it through the extra AV out. There might be some weirdness that you're seeing. So just give it a try first and see what happens. But if you don't use the centering controls, I would definitely just try it without it. Try, a couple of things and just kind of go from there. But it sounds like an amazing setup. And it sounds like that should work just fine. And I mean, there's no voltage issue at this point, because that should be able to handle that voltage peak to peak, especially if it's 0.3 to 8. I mean, under 75 ohm termination, you're looking at 1.5-ish probably, which means you're probably looking at 5 volt without termination. So it's 3 volts under. So there's no issue there. So yeah, I would just give it a try. And I love crazy setups like this. So thank you for sharing. That's a very neat one. Lily Larceny wants to know if there's a zero lag direct HDMI to SCART adapter or cable available, and for curiosity's sake, is the other direction equally possible? They have a DVD player that can output 480i over HDMI, and they're connecting it into a SCART switch. They have a zero lag HDMI to VGA adapter, as well as a VGA to SCART cable into the SCART switch, and then everything goes into a transcoder to component for their CRT. Everything works, they're just trying to reduce the number of connections. So you nailed it. That's exactly what you would need in that scenario. There are some HDMI to SCART converters out there that are kind of hobbyist built in very low quantities, and they each have some sort of issue with it. Not that would apply in your sake, so if you didn't already have that, I would probably say check it out. But what you just described is exactly what I would do in that scenario. I would get a very, very cheap HDMI to VGA converter, like the ones Kuro had determined were good, and the one without audio was like $9 or something like that. And I would plug that into an HD15 to SCART, so you get the H and V sync combined and the voltage dropped. But that's all you would really need, so that would take care of that, and then there you go. So you could do other stuff, but the problem with a lot of these converters, these digital to analog converters, is they don't support 15 kilohertz anymore, 240p or 480i. So trying to find a different one right now would be rough. If you've already found one that works, definitely stick with it. It's kind of harder for component video. I found that the VGA ones are a lot more tolerant, but that's certainly, if you already have a working solution, I really wouldn't mess with it at all, because I think you nailed it. Also, on the flip side, the other direction, SCART to HDMI with zero lag, that's the OSSC. Remember though, there's more to it than that. So going digital to analog in this scenario isn't as complicated as going analog to digital, because you have to take that signal, you have to filter it out, like the low pass filter in the OSSC. Then you have to make sure that it's presented properly in whatever resolution that you're going to. So yeah, that would be a perfect example of a zero lag SCART to HDMI adapter. But that's also, remember, the OSSC technically isn't a scaler, it's a line multiplier. So that's why it's zero latency. It's because it's not really processing the image in the same way that a scaler with a frame buffer or line buffer would as well. But in actuality, that's one of the many reasons why I tell people, if you have an OSSC and you've upgraded to something like a TINC 4K, do not get rid of it unless you really need the extra cash, because then it's really just been migrated over to a tool in your toolbox for exactly scenarios like this, because the OSSC, the original one, is such a capable device. And there's even people working on alternate firmwares for it for this exact scenario. You already have one, you've bought another scaler afterwards. What do you do with it? So yeah, that's definitely the one I would hold on to for that type of stuff. And there's a lot of great options and great things you could do with it. Adam Ant got inspired by something they saw from Consoles for You. They'll start off by saying they know this project is completely excessive and ridiculous. Some of those are my favorite ones, so can't wait to see what you got going, Adam. They want a Game Boy Advance-less permanent setup for 4 swords on the GameCube. Their plan is to use 5 GameCubes, already procured over the years, and then also have HDMI mods or Carby plug-and-play adapters and Game Boy players. Sounds awesome so far. Their question is regarding power. Ooh, okay. They have a few original power supplies, and they don't want to use the cheap aftermarket ones. Smart. Since they're already going overboard with this, why not go further? What are my thoughts on using a medical or industrial rated 12 volt 20 amp power supply and wiring 5 GameCube power port pigtails to the power supply? Are there any potential issues with the GameCubes sharing a common DC bus? Yes, absolutely. I would not do that at all. I love where your head's at. I love thinking out of the box. I love how you're thinking like, let's simplify this setup as much as possible. But if you take 5 original GameCube power supplies and you plug them all into one single power strip that's of mild, decent quality, just not garbage, and you plug it into the wall, there are so few things that could go wrong in that setup. And in fact, I think the two most possible ones would be lightning would strike and blow all of them out at the same time, or one of the original power supplies would be dead or die before the others. But that's really it. Those are the only things that could go wrong, and neither of them are very likely, especially the lightning one. But when you start talking about distributing DC sides of power across multiple devices, even the same device, and you're sharing the same DC ground, and even if you have enough amperage to hold all of it, what is the impedance of the wires that you're using, and how does that affect being connected to all of them? What if one starts drawing more of a load than the other? There are so many things that can go wrong, and it is very likely that you could figure out how to do exactly this and never have a problem. Have a setup that works for, 100 more years and everything still works fine and there's never any problems, but I would not do that at all. I just think, as I'm answering this question, a whole bunch of stuff is popping up in my head of things that could go wrong. Whereas when you talk about plugging 5 GameCubes into a power strip into a wall, there's really not much. That's not enough to overload a circuit breaker. That's not enough to heat the wires up and break anything. There's so few things that could go wrong with the first scenario and so many with the second that it was an awesome question. And I always love weird out of the box stuff like that. But my honest answer is don't do it. Just stick with the easy one. But once again, that was a cool question. So keep those coming. Brian Miller has a question about a Sony TV that they added S-Video to. They didn't know at the time they modded it that it was a Hot Chassis TV. They didn't have any issues with the TV when they used it, which was sparingly, but since finding out about the Hot Chassis, they haven't used it. Their question is whether there is a way to mitigate this so they could use the TV while modded or not. They've seen people say it needs an optocoupler to be used safely, but they've been unable to find any real info about adding one. So this is something that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. My stance on CRTs has always been there is a chance greater than 0 that you could die while working on and messing with CRTs, where there is not a chance greater than 0 that you could die while modding an SNES under normal circumstances. Obviously, if you're modding it in the bathtub with it plugged into the wall, that's on you. But if you have everything, the basic safety precautions, unplugged from the wall, soldering iron, held the proper way, not on the iron, there's almost no chance of you having any real injury. But when you are working on CRTs, there absolutely is. And stuff like messing with a Hot Chassis TV, that kind of walks the line of you probably could figure out a way to mod it in order to be safe and have it work totally fine. But this is something that I don't feel comfortable giving advice on, and I don't know if I would personally do it. So I think also because there's a lot of great TVs out there that you wouldn't need to do that to. And also, like I always tell people, composite on a CRT looks amazing. Composite on a flat panel does not. But you could still work with that if you got the right scaler and everything. But if you just have the cables that came with your console plugged into a consumer grade CRT, that is an awesome lag-free experience that's going to look great. So if you want to continue down this road, Steve would probably be a better person to ask. And there is very likely a way to get around this so you can use it safely. Just be careful because you don't want to end up zapping something. And, there's so many people out there too that get all pompous about it. Oh, that's BS. No one's ever died from that. All right, but what if you have a heart issue that you don't know that you had until you get zapped? What if your pet, who is obviously much smaller and much more susceptible to this, accidentally goes too close to it? There's a lot of stuff like this that people need to definitely take seriously. And even if I'm wrong, telling people to be careful is advice that I stand by, and I'm all right with that. So, err on the side of caution for your own safety. there's a very good chance that you can end up with a totally fine S-Video mod on that CRT, but you would want to go with people that were absolute experts in doing that mod and doing things like working on hot chassis. So very sorry to skirt the answer to this one, but I really want to err on the side of caution when it comes to CRTs. Next up, Hazo said they found themselves in a deep rabbit hole after watching my video, Cheap and Easy HDMI to CRT Converters, and they ended up purchasing an Extron 700. That's awesome. Yeah, welcome to the club. Our fellow nerds often go down these rabbit holes, and I'm glad I could have pointed you in the right direction of some fun equipment. The Extron 700, for anybody that doesn't know, the VSC 700 is a device that should be able to do things like convert signals, have image centering, and do the stuff that I showed in that video, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. But the problem they're having is Hazo owns a retrocastable mister and has always run RGBS through the Saturn DIN to the BNC on BNC inputs on a Sony PVM. So I'm assuming you have one of those Saturn to RCA cables that's just a whole bunch of RCA connectors on the outside, but it's also just RGBS as well. And that would definitely work perfect on the Sony PVM. And however, running that through the Extron 700, the image looks rather composite-like. So what I would do is I would go back to the mister and I would make sure that it's running perfectly through the PVM. You said you double-checked the INI file settings and all of that. I would put it back to the way it was and just kind of check it out and see and double-check. Load up a couple different cores. Does everything look the way it should? If the answer is yes, then go back into running that into the VSC 700. And so at that point, you would also have BNC output cables going from RGBS out to the PVM, and then check the Extron settings. You're going to want to make sure the output mode is in RGBS, because if the output mode is in something else, it would look very weird. Make sure all of the settings of that Extron device are, you could either reset to default and start from scratch, or you could just kind of go through each one, because any of the cool things that those devices could do, such as the image centering that Hazo wanted this thing for the mister, also could have some adverse effects. So double and triple check absolutely everything. And also try it for other uses too, because I've absolutely seen these Extron devices go bad because they're like 20, 30 years old, probably 25 years old, give or take. And I definitely seen the Extron 203s go bad because that's the one that I used for the same purpose that you were trying to use it for. Have easy image centering. And that's definitely one that I believe the power supply caps went in that one. So it just died. It wasn't anything else like that. The other thing that it could be is that those devices sometimes require a higher voltage sync in order for it to work. So in that case, you might want to try something like set the mister to component video, and then use you would have to set the whole chain that way, the Extron as well as the PVM, and see if that works. And then you wouldn't be using sync at all. It would just be YPBPR instead of RGBS. So you could just unplug the sync line. But give both of those a try, see what happens, and double check everything. And hopefully this is a device that you could use for multiple purposes. Having stuff go on consumer grade CRTs with aspect and centering and for the mister, but it might end up not working for one or the other depending on it. So give that a try and see what happens. Let us know how it works, but it seems like it should be a doable solution. Radio Mike 31 said, after months of saving up money, they finally pulled the trigger on a 77-inch LG C4, the one I reviewed a while back. I still love mine. I still stand by everything I say in it. It was an awesome TV, and I still love the Philips Hue with it. So many people are still busting my chops over that. I still think it is awesome, and I'm really glad I spent the money on it. But, sorry, continuing, Mike. They really love it, and they're still messing around with settings. Now, in my video, I mentioned how you could pretty much just click on Filmmaker mode and just leave it. They've been searching forums and Google trying to get the best picture settings, and they found that Filmmaker mode is pretty much recommended everywhere by everyone. The problem is that they're not a huge fan of it. They feel like it looks a little washed out, and they would like the colors to pop more. Their question is, after this much time has passed, have I changed my settings, and do I have a recommendation for someone who doesn't agree with what everyone else is saying about the look of Filmmaker mode? So the short answer is yes, I'm still using Filmmaker mode. However, there are certain scenarios in which I've tried other modes. There was one specific TV show that I actually ended up not watching more than one episode because I didn't like it, but it was like green tinted. And it kept driving me crazy because I thought, all right, is it my HDMI cables? Is something wrong with my TV? Is it something wrong with the settings? Let me try not putting it in Filmmaker mode to see. And it turned out it was just an ugly show that was probably, it was somebody's bright idea to make it green, or somebody did the color correction wrong. So yeah, that was annoying as hell. But I have found different scenarios where it was the same situation of a show or a movie or something looked a little bit off in Filmmaker mode. And then I just went back to one of the other modes and just made sure to turn off any of that motion interpolation or anything else. And it's something that I'm glad Filmmaker mode exists, because if you're remember that these TVs remember different modes for each input, resolution, refresh rate, etc. So being able to always just hit the settings button, I see that Filmmaker mode's on, and that's it. Doesn't really matter if it's something slightly different or on a different input. You would have to double check these every time you have different content. But I would try any of the other modes and just make sure all the interpolation settings are off. You could actually try this with game mode, because game mode won't enable any of that by default. You would just want to go in and make sure True Cinema is on, because I think that's the thing that does that makes sure 3:2 pull down is not applied. And for 24p content, it's just repeated 5 frames in a row. You could try that and make sure that any of the extra processing is off. So yeah, I guess game mode would be another one to try just to see. And this is walking down the road of preference now. I mean, I guess you could say that about all TV settings, but if you, like you, Mike, if you care about making sure that you're trying to watch it the best way possible and you just don't like the overall look of Filmmaker mode, I would start with game mode next and then kind of go from there, because game mode also kind of goes down the theory of let's turn off all of this unnecessary stuff that I don't need, but it also is a little bit brighter. So you could try doing it that way and go from there. So you know what? If you don't mind, chime back in next week and let me know what you think. If that was good enough, cool, problem solved. And if not, I'll fire up this TV again and I'll see if I could figure out exactly what I did for people that don't want Filmmaker mode, but still want all of the good picture processing or lack of picture processing that enables. So yeah, let me know what you think and we'll go from there. A quick one from Jason Guffey. What screws do NES game cartridges use? I don't have the slightest clue. I'm going to have to defer to the chat for this one. I even was curious and looked up on Console 5 to see if they had them, and I don't think they have the exact ones. They have the security bit screws for SNES cartridges, but the ones for NES were the ones that kind of sort of looked like Phillips head, but also had the flathead slit in the middle of them. So does anybody know where to get replacements of those for people that just want to keep everything as original as possible, but maybe they lost a screw or broke it or something like that, or maybe somebody spilled soda on it so the screws all rotted out? Who knows? But that's a great question, and one that I just have no idea what the answer is. So hopefully anybody in the chat could chime in. And please respectfully remember that you can't post links. I don't delete them, and they don't even show up in my held for review bin. YouTube just auto deletes that stuff. So just say, like, well, I did check Console 5, maybe I missed it. So I would just say, go to Console 5, search for the term XYZ screw, whatever. And, you know, if I try to catch those in the comments, and then I'll post the link afterwards and just confirm. So if anybody knows where to get those, please let us know. But good question, Jason. I got nothing for this one. Well, that's it for this week. As always, if you have any questions at all, please just ask them wherever it is that you support in the latest Q&A post. The way these services work, it's kind of tricky to figure out what's a new question on an old post. So just go to wherever this week or whatever the latest Q&A that you're listening to's post is and ask the question there. And also, the questions this week were only on Patreon, but they're for everybody who supports. I appreciate all of you equally. It's just that there's often more people, or there's more people that support on Patreon, which is why you see more questions pop up there. But you're all awesome. I appreciate all of you. Thank you all so much for the support. It really is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you again, and I'll see you next week.